Why would a woman who once dragged two wounded soldiers out of the fire be called a coward in front of her peers? That question burned silently across the formation at Fort Ironville as the mist rolled heavy and the sun had yet to break the horizon. Rows of boots pressed into the cold earth, breaths clouding into the air, discipline locking every man and woman into place. Yet all eyes, even the ones pretending not to look, gravitated toward her. Captain Bate Carver, 34. Broad-shouldered but lean, a soldier carved by years, by battles fought overseas, by wounds both visible and hidden beneath the fabric of her jacket. She stood taller than most men in that line, though her hand rested against her left shoulder as if holding something fragile together. Colonel Steele's lips curled into a smirk. It wasn't the casual amusement of a superior officer overseeing a drill. It was pointed, targeted. His eyes stayed fixed on Bate, a sharpened glare meant to slice her down in front of everyone. He barked orders, his voice shattering the silence like a whip. Soldiers responded in perfect rhythm, but the rhythm faltered when he laughed. The sound wasn't light-hearted. It was cruel, mocking. It spread across the formation like shrapnel. Some soldiers winced. Others pretended not to notice, but everyone heard it, and they all knew who it was aimed at. Bate didn't flinch, not outwardly. She'd been laughed at before, underestimated before, but this was different. This was her commanding officer, branding her weakness as spectacle. Her fingers slid against the zipper of her PT jacket. The fabric felt heavier than Kevlar. For a breath, she shut her eyes. She was no longer standing in the cool mist of Fort Ironville. She was back in another dawn, another explosion, when fire tore through metal and bone, when her left side stopped obeying her, when the world became sand and smoke. The scar under her jacket throbbed as if remembering with her. When her eyes opened, she made a choice. The zipper slid down. The sound was small, almost ordinary, but in that silence it was a detonation. The fabric fell open, and beneath the scars appeared, jagged lines carved by fire and steel, flesh seared into raised ridges that no surgeon could erase. The air went still. The whispers, the smirks, even Steele's laughter died in an instant. A woman accused of cowardice now stood with living proof of sacrifice etched across her skin. Bates said nothing. She didn't need to. Her discipline, her silence, carried more weight than any outburst could. And yet silence is heavy, heavier than the scars, heavier than the jacket. It presses down until even the strongest shoulders ache. That was Bate Carver's burden. Days at Fort Ironville blurred with routine. Sunrise jogs, medical checks, vials lined neatly in her kit. Bate was precise, almost surgical in her order. To some it looked like coldness. To her it was survival. She heard the whispers in the mess hall. She always heard them. Young recruits, too young to remember the wars she had bled through, leaned close, their voices low but not low enough. She gets special treatment because she's a woman. That shoulder thing, just her excuse to skip training. Bate didn't answer. Never did. She had learned long ago that silence could be armor. You could argue yourself hoarse, or you could let the truth stand on its own. But armor doesn't mean invulnerable. Each word chipped, a slow erosion. At the infirmary, she poured herself into work. Vitals logged, sprains wrapped, coughs soothed. When a private twisted his ankle on the obstacle course, she was the one who half carried him across the yard, murmuring reassurance as the boy leaned against her. He never knew each step sent a streak of pain down her arm. That carrying weight with her left side felt like glass grinding in her bones. He only knew she seemed unshakable. At night, alone in her room off the infirmary, she opened a wooden box. Inside were the letters she never mailed. Every one of them began the same. "Dad, I'm fine." She told him about the weather, about Chow, about a stray dog that wandered the field. She never wrote about the phantom pain that woke her at 3 a.m., or the ache that made her hand tremble when gripping a pen. Her father was an old mechanic from Ohio. He didn't need to lose sleep over a daughter who already carried more than enough. The soldiers around her never saw those letters. They never saw the medals in her locker or the surgical plates buried under her skin. They never saw the nights she sat by the wounded, whispering encouragement when morphine blurred their vision. They saw silence. They mistook it for weakness. And Beth endured, as she always had. But the army has a way of forcing choices, testing even the strongest silence. The notice came before sunrise. A mass casualty combat drill at the fuel depot, every unit on base contributing, medical detachment in the center of it. Beth received the order with her usual composure. Rescue drills weren't new. Blood, burns, broken bones, she'd seen worse. She'd lived worse. But Steele made sure it wouldn't be that simple. Standing tall before the assembled ranks, his voice carried across the mist. Every soldier will complete the combat fitness test. No exceptions. No excuses. The words hit like a blast wave. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone knew exceptions existed. Profiles for those recovering from injury. Modified lanes for those who had earned them in blood. Regulations existed for a reason. Beth felt her shoulder tighten, the ache flaring as if protesting the very thought. Still, she stepped forward. "Sir, I have a permanent profile for my shoulder, authorized for modified lanes." Steele cut her off sharp as a whip. "Excuses." The words snapped in the air. Soldiers shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. His eyes bored into her, daring her to argue. Beth's jaw tightened. She wanted to explain about the screws, the plates, the nightmares that still woke her gasping. But she already knew explanations didn't matter to men like Steele. Words were weakness. Scars were invisible unless they showed in reps or miles. The formation broke. Soldiers stretched, dropped to warm-ups. Some avoided looking at her, others smirked. "See, told you. She hides behind that injury." Beth stood on the edge, chest tight with anger, shame pressing down. For a fleeting moment, she considered walking away. File for reassignment. Vanish into hospital duty where the whispers couldn't reach her. She imagined writing her father for real. "Dad, I've transferred. It's easier this way." But just as the thought settled, another memory returned. Her mother's hands, slipping a stethoscope into her palm before deploying to a field hospital. A faint engraving etched into the metal, E73, a reminder of compassion, a reminder of duty. That stethoscope was waiting for her in Doc Harlan's office. She knew it even before he slid the parcel across his desk. Her mother's handwriting faded but clear on the paper. Inside, the old steel chess piece, polished, worn, carved with E73, and a letter. "Beth, you don't have to prove anything except your humanity. Strength is not the absence of pain. It's the choice to keep serving even when pain insists you stop." Beth's vision blurred. For years she had carried her scars half ashamed, half defiant. But here was proof her mother had always known this path would test her beyond flesh and bone. Doc Harlan's voice filled the quiet. "Discipline isn't punishment, Captain. It's endurance. It's what lets you serve long enough to save the next soldier. That's what matters." Beth closed her fingers around the cool steel. The engraved letters pressed into her palm like a seal. E73. For the first time since Steele's laughter echoed across the field, Beth felt the fire inside steady. She would not run. She would not hide. The morning of the test arrived, cold fog clinging low over the field. Soldiers stamped their boots, restless energy buzzing. Beth sat apart, winding the brace tight around her shoulder. Velcro rasped like thunder in her ears. This was it, the crucible, the place where she would either stand or break in front of them all. Her mother's words lingered. "Hold the line, then lift the fallen." Beth rose, steady despite the pain. And when she stepped to the starting line, silence followed her. Not respect, not yet. But something was shifting. Something no one expected. What does it take for silence to shatter? A laugh, a word, or the moment when a soldier falls to the ground with the weight of every eye on her. The whistle cut through the cold morning air. Dozens of bodies dropped in unison, gravel crunching beneath palms, arms pumped like pistons, breath turned into steam, sweat already glistened on bare necks despite the chill. Beth lowered herself slowly, her brace pulling tight, her shoulders screaming with each inch. One rep, controlled, then another, her spine straight, her core locked, precision over numbers. She breathed the way her therapist had taught her, 4 beats in, 7 out. It steadied her, a rhythm against chaos. Colonel Steele's shadow loomed nearby, his voice cracked like a whip. "Is that all you've got, Carver? My recruits can do more on their first day." Heads turned, some smirked, others shifted uncomfortably. Beth kept her eyes on the ground. "Hold the line," she whispered to herself. By the time the whistle blew again, she had barely scraped double digits. It didn't matter. She hadn't collapsed. She hadn't cheated. She had endured. She rose to her knees, chest heaving. The next station waited. The sandbag carry. 70 pounds of dead weight, heavier than it looked, meant to simulate hauling gear or dragging a body. Beth bent, strapped the brace tighter, and lifted. Her shoulders screamed. Her breath caught. Step by step she moved forward, not fast, not smooth, but steady. Some soldiers jogged past her, laughing under their breath. Grandma's moving faster than that. Steele smirked, his voice sharp. "If you can't carry the weight, Carver, maybe you don't belong here." Beth clenched her jaw. Every nerve begged her to drop it, but she didn't. She carried the sack to the line, turned, carried it back. When she dropped it, her arms quivered, but she stayed upright. And from the corner of her ear, a low voice cut through. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cadence, not loud enough for the colonel to hear, just enough for her. Sergeant June Morales packing nearby, not assigned to her lane but present all the same. Beth gave the faintest nod, a soldier's way of saying thanks. The ammo can lift, a box of steel heavy and cold. Beth gripped it, her brace strained. She lifted once, twice, clean reps though her shoulders shook with every rise. Steele barked again. "What is this, Carver, a tea party? Lift like a soldier." And then Beth caught it, sunlight flashing on a phone angled low. Sergeant Pike, pretending to tie his boot but recording, not her, not exactly, him, recording Steele's cruelty. Beth pressed harder, even as her stomach knotted. She didn't want this spectacle archived, but she couldn't stop it. The final event loomed, the rescue sled drag. Weighted, strapped with a dummy meant to mimic the dead weight of a fallen comrade, the most brutal test of the circuit. Beth crouched, gripped the leather straps. They cut into her palms. She leaned back, legs braced, muscles trembling. The sled lurched, screeched forward. And in that instant, the sound became something else. Not steel on asphalt, but the scream of armored doors twisting in fire. Her lungs filled with smoke. She was back on that desert road, back in the blast. Private Langston pinned beneath metal, clawing at the air. Sergeant Miller bleeding out, begging for help. Beth froze, breath ragged. Steele's voice pierced the haze. "Coward, you can't even drag a dummy. How do you expect to drag a man?" The word ripped through her like shrapnel. Coward. She had never heard it aimed at her. Not then, not in the operating room, not once. Her grip faltered. The sled clanged back against the ground. Soldiers gasped. Some turned away, ashamed. Others stared, wide-eyed. Beth's knees hit gravel. Her palms scraped raw. Dust filled her mouth. Steele's voice cut again. "Coward." The silence after was heavier than the word itself. For a moment she almost stayed there. Her pride crushed beneath him, her body broken by pain. Then her fingers brushed something on her wrist, the paracord bracelet, woven years ago by her mother's hands, frayed but strong. She remembered her mother's whisper. "This cord is stronger than it looks. So are you. Hold it and you'll remember who you are." Beth clenched it until it bit into her skin. Slowly she planted one boot against the ground, gravel shifted, then the other. Legs trembling, shoulders shaking, she rose. The formation murmured. Morale stood nearby, lips pressed into the faintest smile, not pity, respect. Bates' chest heaved. Her eyes locked on Steele across the field. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. The act of rising was enough. The word coward still hung in the air, but it no longer belonged to her. She gripped the straps again. Pain screamed. Will answered louder. Step by step, inch by inch, she dragged the weight forward once more. The silence after was deafening. Bate released the straps, body trembling but upright. Her hands found the zipper of her jacket. The sound was small, but it carried across the field like a rifle crack. Zip by zip by zip. The sleeves slid off her arms, the jacket dropped. Gasps erupted. Across her back, ink and scar tissue told a story louder than any voice. A tattoo spread wide, the silhouette of an eagle, wings outstretched. But the ink was broken, scarred through, the wings fractured by burns and shrapnel wounds. Bate turned slowly, her scars visible now, carved into her shoulders, ribs, arms. Her voice was calm, steady. Afghanistan, our convoy hit an IED. The blast threw me against the vehicle, tore through my shoulder, filled me with shrapnel. Here, she traced the line down her ribs. They pulled metal from beside my heart. Here they rebuilt the bone they said would never hold again. These smaller marks, dozens of fragments they dug out of me. She paused. Her words weren't bitter. They weren't asking for pity. They were fact. Truth, spoken in a voice steady enough to silence every whisper. I saved 2 men that night. Sergeant Miller, Private Langston, dragged them out before the fire took them, treated their wounds while my own body was torn apart. Her gaze swept across the formation. I don't wear these scars for excuses. I wear them because they remind me why we serve. To stand when others fall. To hold the line, then lift the fallen. Morale stepped forward, her voice sharp. It's true, I was there. Carver did everything she said. She's the reason 2 men lived to see home. The formation rippled with murmurs. Soldiers who had doubted her nodded slowly. Others bowed their heads. Bates' eyes locked on Steele's. For the first time his jaw tightened. His eyes wavered. The man who had branded her a coward now looked small beneath the weight of her truth. Bate bent, picked up her jacket, folded it neatly over her arm. When she rose again, her voice carried across the field. Sir, I have never asked for pity. I have only asked for respect, for the cost paid in service. The silence was hers now. And just when the formation thought the moment had ended, the sirens blared. Red lights flashed across the depot. Smoke curled into the sky. A voice boomed over the loudspeaker. Fire in the fuel storage. Personnel trapped inside. The soldiers froze. Steele hesitated. Bates' eyes narrowed. The test was over. The real trial was just beginning. What happens when the smoke rises faster than orders can be given? When a commander falters, and a soldier branded as weak is the only one who moves forward? The alarms wailed across Fort Ironville, a banshee cry of warning. From beyond the PT field, black smoke curled upward, carried by the wind until it swallowed the pale morning sky. Fire in the fuel storage, personnel trapped inside. The voice from the loudspeaker rang sharp, urgent, impossible to ignore. Yet for a long, unbearable moment the formation stayed frozen. Soldiers shifted uneasily, their discipline cracked by the weight of uncertainty. Colonel Steele stood at the front, jaw locked, eyes darting between the ranks and the billowing smoke. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His authority, iron a minute ago, now bent under the heat of real flames. Carver stepped forward. Morale's Pike, you're with me. Everyone else secure the perimeter and keep clear of the fire break. Her tone cut clean through the chaos. No hesitation, no room for doubt. Morales snapped into motion instantly, jogging to her side. Pike hesitated, glancing at Steele, waiting for his command. Steele's silence was his answer. Beth didn't wait. She sprinted toward the depot, boots pounding against the asphalt. The others followed. Each stride brought heat closer. The air thickened, sharp with the bite of burning fuel. Smoke stung eyes and lungs. Beth's shoulder screamed with every motion, but she locked it away. This wasn't about pain. This was about the man trapped inside. At the depot entrance, flames licked the rafters, thick plumes rolling out in violent gusts. Beth uncoiled a length of paracord from her belt, looped it around the doorframe, and yanked it tight. Line stays fixed here. We follow it out, no exceptions. She looked them both in the eye. 2 and 2 out. Morales, you're on my flank. Pike, you cover the rear. Steele's command may be frozen, but we'll run this by the book. Pike swallowed hard, then clipped his glove to the cord. For once, he didn't argue. Beth toggled her radio. Channel 1 inside team. Channel 2 outside relay. Keep chatter clear. She pulled her scarf up over her mouth, dropped low, and plunged into the smoke. Inside, the world shrank. Heat roared from every surface. Shadows danced wildly against steel drums stacked along the walls. Each breath tasted of soot and grit, burning the back of her throat. Beth crouched low, flashlight sweeping across warped shapes. Her hand traced the cord. Over here, Morales's voice cut through the haze. Beth crawled to her. On the ground, half covered by debris, lay the technician, a young man, maybe 25. His chest rose faintly, alive but fatting. Beth dropped to his side, pressing 2 fingers against his neck. A weak, uneven pulse throbbed beneath the grime. She forced herself into action. Morales, clear the debris. Pike, cover overhead, watch for collapse. They moved as one. Morales hauled away chunks of metal, coughing into her sleeve. Pike shone his light upward, eyes darting for sparks raining from weakened beams. Beth slipped her good arm beneath the technician's shoulder. Her injured side screamed in protest, nerves lit up like fire, but she didn't let go. Got him, she rasped, back to the cord now. Step by step, they dragged the man along the line. The smoke pressed in, suffocating, stealing thought. Beth's vision blurred, her lungs burning with every breath, but the cord in her hand pulled her forward, each inch a lifeline. At last, daylight slashed through the haze. They stumbled out of the inferno. Fresh air seared their throats like ice. Medics rushed forward, lifting the technician onto a stretcher. Oxygen masks pressed to his face. Voices shouted vitals, orders, relief. Beth dropped to one knee, bracing herself with a trembling hand. Her lungs heaved, her scar throbbed, but she was steady. Morales clapped her shoulder, eyes shining beneath soot. Pike stood silent, staring at Beth with something unfamiliar: respect. His phone still rested in his pocket. The recording of Steele's insult suddenly weighed heavier than Steele itself. Beth rose slowly, every muscle trembling, her voice low but certain. One man saved, that's what discipline is for. And for the first time, Pike didn't smirk, he nodded. By noon, the depot fire was out. The technician survived, thanks to Beth's steady hands and the quick teamwork she had commanded. Across the base, soldiers murmured. They had seen her scars. They had seen her drag the sled despite the colonel's words. They had seen her walk into fire without orders when others froze. Respect hung in the air like a truth long denied. But in the age of phones and whispers, truth never stays pure for long. That afternoon, Pike's recording slipped into a private group chat. A careless click, a thoughtless share. The video played Steele's voice. "Coward, you can't even drag a dummy." The camera angle caught Beth collapsing, her face twisted in pain. But not the rise, not the scars, not the fire, just her fall and Steele's scorn. By evening, the barracks buzzed. She must have leaked it herself. Who else would humiliate a colonel like that? She's climbing rank by tearing someone else down. The truth of her heroism was buried beneath rumors of betrayal. Bate heard them all. She walked the halls steady, her silence mistaken again for weakness. That night in her quarters, the stethoscope her mother had left rested beside the folded letters she never sent. Her thumb traced the engraving, E73. Her lips whispered words only she heard. "This isn't about me." Because she knew if she defended herself loudly, the story would twist. From discipline to drama, from service to scandal, the fragile threads of trust would snap. So she bore the weight quietly. She patched ankles, checked vitals, carried herself as always steady, disciplined, unshaken. Only Morales caught the weariness in her eyes, the slight drag in her steps when she thought no one was watching. The sting of words cut deeper than shrapnel ever had. But Bate endured. The fire hadn't been the hardest trial. The rumor was. And it looked like she would pay dearly, her honor overshadowed, her courage buried, until a silent witness stepped forward. How long can a soldier carry silence before truth demands to be spoken? Morning assembly gathered under a heavy sky. Soldiers stood stiff, their chatter hushed but restless. The whispers about Bate Carver hadn't died in the night. They lingered like smoke, clinging, choking. Colonel Steele loomed at the front, his authority dented but not yet broken. His eyes swept across the ranks, hard and unreadable. Then a voice cut through. "Before this unit judges one of its own, the truth must be seen." Doc Harlan stepped forward. The old physician's shoulders were rounded, his hair thinned to silver, but his voice carried the weight of years that no rank could rival. In his hand, he carried a small black case. He opened it, producing a compact medical camera. A click, a screen flickered to life. Grainy footage filled the display, time-stamped and marked from the infirmary's training records. The video showed Bates' profile during the fitness test. The collapse, the rise, the sled dragging across the asphalt. Her face twisted with pain but steady, no phone in her hands, no hidden tricks. Gasps rippled through the formation. Harlan's voice sharpened. Captain Carver did not leak anything. The only person recording that morning was Sergeant Pike. Every head turned. Pike froze. The phone in his pocket felt like an anchor. His face flushed red. Slowly, painfully, he stepped forward. "It's true," he said. His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. "I filmed it. I thought I was exposing the colonel's cruelty. I never meant for it to spread, and I sure as hell didn't think it would fall back on her." He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on Bate. "I'm sorry for doubting you, for using your pain as spectacle." Bate didn't move at first. She only inclined her head, a gesture of acceptance without triumph. Silence as forgiveness. The weight shifted, not completely, not yet. Then Steele's voice came, low, almost unrecognizable. "You're right, Pike, but the blame isn't yours alone." The colonel's gaze moved to Bate. For once, no smirk, no sneer, just the weight of something long buried. "Years ago, my son, Cadet Jonathan Steele, died in a training accident." The words struck like thunder. The formation stiffened. Even Harlan's eyes widened faintly. Steele's voice was rough, each word dragged from a wound that had never healed. Regulations existed, profiles were in place, but his commander ignored them, demanded he push through. "No exceptions," they said, "and my boy never came home." The silence deepened. "I swore it would never happen again. I thought if I crushed every excuse, if I demanded the same from all, I could prevent another father from burying his child." He looked down, his jaw tight, his eyes wet but unblinking. "But in my fear, I became the very kind of officer I despised, and in that fear I caused harm." Bates' eyes softened. Her voice, steady but quiet, carried across the formation. "The right discipline saves lives, the wrong discipline takes them." For a moment the two stood locked in silence. Not enemies, not commander and subordinate, just two people with scars, one visible, one hidden. Steele's facade cracked. His grief, long twisted into cruelty, showed itself. And for the first time he looked not like iron, but like a man who had let pain lead him astray. Morale stepped forward. "Sir, this unit doesn't need perfection. It needs leaders who know the difference between strength and stubbornness." The colonel gave a small nod. Humility edged into his eyes. "Then it will have them. Effective immediately, new protocols will be established. Medical briefings before every PT. Adaptive lanes for soldiers with permanent profiles. No one dismissed without understanding their scars." A murmur swept the ranks. Relief, agreement. Steele turned to Bate. Addressed her not as a subordinate to be mocked, but as a peer in sacrifice. "Captain Carver," he said quietly, "I can't erase the harm I've done, but I can ensure your courage shapes what comes next if you'll allow it." Bate inhaled slowly. The paracord bracelet pressed against her wrist, her mother's words alive in its frayed fibers. She nodded once. "Then let's make sure no soldier ever carries scars alone again." The formation broke into applause, not raucous, not shallow, steady, measured, filled with respect. Bate stood quietly, her jacket folded over her arm, her scars hidden once more, but their meaning etched into every heart present. The sun broke through the clouds, its light falling across the field. For the first time in years, Fort Ironville felt less like a battlefield of whispers and more like a place of truth. The days that followed moved differently. No more smirks when Bate walked into the mess hall. No more whispers at her back. Soldiers walked taller, their voices carrying less gossip, more weight. But Bate didn't rest on vindication. She turned it into action. Inside a refurbished training hall, she built something new. A course unlike anything Fort Ironville had seen before. Stenciled in bold letters on the wall, Adaptive Readiness Training. The class wasn't about punishing numbers. It wasn't about breaking bodies. It was about serving longer, smarter, with dignity intact. Bates stood at the front, recruits and veterans seated before her, some skeptical, some eager. She lifted the old stethoscope her mother had left her. Its engraving caught the fluorescent light, E73. "This," she said, her voice calm but commanding, "is where I learned every soldier is a story. You read that story before you make your judgment. Rule number 1, read before you rate." She paused, letting it settle. Rule 2, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. In combat, rushing costs lives, precision saves them. She unclasped the paracord bracelet from her wrist, holding it high. Rule 3, hold the line, then lift the fallen. Never measure strength only by what you can carry. Measure it by who you help carry forward. The soldiers leaned in, not because of her scars, not because of her humiliation, but because the truth in her voice reached them. Training unfolded with drills that matched her words, modified lanes for injured soldiers, breathing techniques alongside sandbag carries. No one left behind. No one labeled weak for fighting battles unseen. Bate had turned her silence into a doctrine. And the soldiers followed. One morning, as the session ended, Bate called forward a young private. He looked nervous, shifting on his boots. He had once been among those who snickered at her collapse. Bate pressed the paracord bracelet into his palm. "Tomorrow, it's your turn to hold the line. Don't forget what that means." The private swallowed hard, eyes bright. "Yes, ma'am." Outside, the base hummed as usual. Helicopters roared. Cadence echoed. But inside that hall, something lasting had been passed on. Not just training, not just discipline. A legacy. Because in the end, honor isn't counted in push-ups or medals. It's counted in how many times you choose to rise again, not for yourself, but for the soldier beside you. Bate Carver's scars were no longer whispers of weakness. They were proof. Proof that courage is not the absence of pain, but the decision to keep standing. And sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. What does it take to change a culture built on iron and pride? Carver stood in the refurbished training hall, the words Adaptive Readiness Training stenciled in black above the doors. Soldiers filed in, some curious, some skeptical, some carrying smirks they thought she couldn't see. She saw them all. The room smelled faintly of fresh paint and floor polish, a sharp contrast to the soot that still haunted her uniform after the depot fire. She rested one hand lightly on the old stethoscope at her chest, the engraving pressing into her skin like an anchor. This was the next battle. Not against insurgents, not against flames, but against doubt, quiet, insidious, harder to drag than any weighted sled. The recruits sat cross-legged on the mats. Some veterans leaned against the walls, arms crossed, skeptical. Beth let the silence stretch. She had learned long ago that silence could hold more authority than shouting. Finally she spoke. You've all been measured by numbers, push-ups, miles, times, scores. Her eyes swept across the room. But numbers don't tell the whole story. Strength isn't in how many reps you do before you collapse. Strength is in whether you rise when you've already fallen. She unclasped the paracord bracelet from her wrist, holding it high. This was given to me by someone who understood that. Rule number 1, hold the line, then lift the fallen. A murmur rippled through the recruits. Some nodded, others shifted unimpressed. Beth clipped the bracelet back on and lifted the stethoscope next. Rule 2, read before you rate. Every soldier carries a story under their uniform. Some scars are visible, others aren't. If you judge without reading, you miss the truth. Her voice lowered, steady but sharp. Rule 3, slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. You'll learn why today. The first drill was simple, or seemed simple. Sandbag carries down and back. But instead of focusing on speed, Beth instructed them to focus on rhythm, controlled breathing, steady steps. Count your breath, 4 in, 7 out, hold the line. The first group sprinted off, mocking laughter spilling as they raced. Halfway down the lane, shoulders slumped, legs buckled, sacks dropped to the dirt. Beth didn't flinch. She simply walked forward, crouched beside the nearest private gasping for air. Slow is smooth, she said quietly. Smooth is fast, try again. By the end, the recruits who had mocked were moving slower, but further. Not broken, not quitting, just steady. The next exercise was partner lifts. One soldier carried another across the mats, simulating casualty extraction. The room filled with grunts, laughter, and a few stumbles. One recruit dropped his partner too hard, drawing a sharp chuckle from the back. Beth's gaze snapped toward the sound. "Private Yates," she said. The young man stiffened, smirk vanishing. "Front and center." He stepped forward, uneasy under the weight of her steady eyes. Beth unclasped her bracelet and pressed it into his palm. "Tomorrow, it's your turn to hold the line. Don't forget what that means." The private swallowed hard, his face flushing. For the first time he didn't smirk. He nodded, voice low. "Yes, ma'am." Not all resistance was obvious. Some came in whispers, in the way soldiers rolled their eyes when she wasn't looking, in the way they tested her rules, pushing boundaries. One afternoon, a corporal deliberately rushed through a drill, cutting corners. When Beth called him on it, he muttered under his breath, "Easy for you to preach when you've got a profile." The room went silent, eyes flicked to Beth. She stood still, her scar burning beneath her sleeve. Then she stepped forward, close enough that her voice reached him and no one else. "You think my profile makes me weak," she whispered. The corporal's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Beth slowly rolled up her sleeve, revealing the jagged scars along her arm, the ink of her eagle tattoo fractured by lines of fire. "This profile is the reason I can still lift anything at all. It's the reason 2 men made it home alive. You don't earn weakness from scars. You earn wisdom." Her words weren't loud, but the silence that followed carried them to every corner of the room. The corporal swallowed hard and lowered his gaze. Bate rolled her sleeve back down. Again, slow, smooth, this time do it right. Each day, the program grew. Soldiers who once whispered began to show up early. Recruits who laughed at her scars began to lean in when she spoke. But not everyone. There were still those who doubted her, still those who clung to Steele's old doctrine of no exceptions. One night, Bate overheard them in the mess hall. "She's softening us, making excuses look noble. Yeah, this base doesn't need therapy sessions. It needs warriors." Bate sat alone at her table, hands wrapped around her mug. She didn't turn, didn't respond. But her chest tightened. She carried the weight back to her quarters, where the stethoscope and letters waited in their box. She pulled out a page, began to write. "Dad, they don't see it yet, but I have to believe they will. I have to believe discipline isn't about crushing weakness. It's about keeping us alive long enough to lift each other. If I'm wrong, then maybe I don't belong here. But if I'm right, maybe this place can change." She folded the letter, slid it into the box with the others. Sleep didn't come easy that night. The next morning, Bate gathered the unit outside the hall. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds. She pointed to the field where the sleds were laid out. "Today," she said, "we test the line." The soldiers stiffened, remembering the day Steele had branded her a coward, remembering the sled that had broken her to the ground. Bate stepped forward, placed her hands on the straps and dragged. The screech of metal cut through the field, the sound stabbing through memory. Her shoulder screamed, her knees trembled. But this time she didn't falter. "One step, two." "Cadence," Morales shouted from the side. "1, 2, 3, 4." The recruits picked it up, their voices rising. Bate dragged the sled all the way down and back. She dropped the straps, chest heaving, but she stayed upright. The recruit stood silent, watching. Bate's voice carried across the field. "This is why we hold the line, not for pride, not for numbers, for the one who will need us most when it matters." The silence held. Then one voice called out, "Respect." Another joined, and another, until the field echoed with a single word that washed over her like balm. "Respect." Bate walked back across the field, the paracord bracelet heavy on her wrist. Her scars burned beneath her shirt, but they didn't weigh her down. She had carried them alone for too long. Now she realized she didn't have to. And for the first time since the blast on that desert road, Bate Carver felt something she hadn't dared to hope for. Not just survival. Belonging. 3. What happens when the story of one soldier grows larger than the walls meant to contain it? Bate Carver didn't seek attention. She never had. But stories have a way of traveling, carried by whispers, reshaped by screens. Her scars, her stand against Steele, her new training doctrine, word spread beyond Fort Ironville faster than she realized. It began with a single visitor. A civilian sedan rolled through the gates one afternoon, its arrival unusual enough to ripple unease across the yard. Out stepped a man in a pressed suit, carrying a slim briefcase, his shoes too clean for dirt and drills. He asked for Captain Carver by name. Bate met him in the briefing room, Morales shadowing her quietly. "Captain Carver," the man said, extending a hand. "Daniel Reeve, Department of Defense Oversight. I'm here to evaluate this." He gestured vaguely. "Adaptive readiness training." Bate shook his hand firmly, her expression calm. Reeve's smile was polite but thin. "You've stirred attention. Higher-ups are intrigued, some impressed, others skeptical. My job is to decide whether your program is a model for the future or a distraction." Morales bristled. "It's saving soldiers already." Bate lifted a hand, quieting her. Her eyes stayed on Reeve. "You'll see for yourself." That evening, Bate stood in the training hall before a room fuller than ever. Reeve sat in the back, pen poised, eyes sharp. His presence hung heavy, every soldier aware they were being judged. Bait started simple, breathing drills, 4 in, 7 out, a rhythm that looked trivial on the surface but carried weight when applied under strain. Reeves scribbled something on his pad. Next came sandbag carries. Instead of raw speed, Bait instructed them to match steps in pairs, breathing together, moving as one. Discipline isn't just what you endure alone, she told them. It's what you carry together. Reeves' brows lifted faintly. He kept writing. Then the sled drag. Bait assigned pairs, mixing seasoned soldiers with newer recruits. The room buzzed with uncertainty. This test isn't about who finishes first, Bait said. It's about who finishes standing. The whistle blew, the sled screeched, grunts filled the air. One private faltered halfway down, his knee buckling. Before he hit the ground, his partner caught him, locked arms, steadied his pace. Together, they dragged the weight across the finish. Bait nodded once. That's the line. From the back, Reeves' pen paused. For the first time, his expression softened. Later, outside under the cooling sky, Reeve approached Bait. You have something here, he admitted. But critics will say you're lowering standards, making excuses look like innovation. Bait's gaze didn't waver. If standards measure only speed and numbers, then they'll bury more soldiers. Discipline should keep us alive, not break us for show. Reeve studied her scars, visible along her neck where her collar shifted. And you believe your pain qualifies you to change doctrine. Bait's voice was calm. I believe my scars remind me what happens when doctrine forgets humanity. Reeve held her eyes for a long beat, then he closed his notepad. The review will continue. Expect others to come. Some won't be as open. The others arrived soon enough. Weeks later, a convoy of officers from another base visited. Their insignia gleamed. Their eyes scanned the hall with skepticism. They asked no questions. They simply watched. Bait guided her class as usual, breathing, rhythm, pair carries, precision. When the session ended, one officer, Colonel Barrack, stepped forward. His voice carried sharp across the room. Captain Carver, he said, this looks like therapy, not training. The battlefield doesn't slow down for your breathing exercises. It doesn't care about your scars. The soldiers shifted uneasily. Bait stood steady. You're right, sir, she said quietly. The battlefield doesn't slow, but neither does panic, and panic kills faster than bullets. These drills don't make soldiers weaker. They give them the tools to outlast the panic. Barrack's lips curled faintly, half sneer, half challenge. Convince me. Show me how this works under fire. Bait's chest tightened, a challenge meant to expose, to humiliate, but she nodded. Then we'll take it outside. That afternoon, the field became a crucible again. Barrack had arranged a live simulation, urban combat drill, smoke grenades, blanks, sirens. Bait divided her unit, pairing recruits with veterans, weaving her doctrine into the scenario. The whistle blew, chaos erupted. Soldiers charged through smoke-filled alleys, dummies strapped as casualties, sandbags doubling as gear. Noise swallowed discipline. Panic clawed at the edges. Bait moved among them, her voice calm, anchoring. 4 in, 7 out, hold the line. Recruits staggered but steadied. Partners leaned on each other. Precision replaced frenzy. Step by step, they cleared the drill zone, dragging every dummy to safety. When it ended, the unit stood sweating, gasping, but intact. No one broken, no one left behind. Barrack's sneer faltered. He said nothing. Bait turned to her soldiers. This is discipline, not about who crosses first, about who crosses together. The recruits stood taller. Their eyes carried something new, not doubt, conviction. That night, Bait sat alone in her quarters. She wrote again. Dad, today they tried to break what we've built, but the unit didn't falter. They held the line. Maybe that's all discipline really is, keeping steady when chaos demands collapse. She folded the letter, slid it into the box. But her hand lingered. The scars beneath her sleeve burned faintly, not in shame but in reminder. Outside scrutiny would keep coming, she knew it. And yet, for the first time, she felt ready. Because the soldiers beside her no longer whispered. They followed. Still, silence carries its own tests. Late one evening, Morales found her sitting on the bleachers, shoulders hunched, the field empty. "You okay?" Morales asked softly. Bate didn't answer at first. Her hands fiddled with the paracord bracelet, twisting the fibers until they bit into her skin. "I wonder," she finally said, her voice low, "if all this teaching, fighting the whispers, pushing against brass, if it's really changing anything, or if I'm just keeping busy, trying to outrun a scar that never lets go." Morales sat beside her. The night air was cool, the bass quiet. "You're not outrunning it," Morales said. "You're carrying it. And every time you lift someone else, you make it lighter for them and maybe, one day, for yourself." Bates' throat tightened. She said nothing, but the words sank deep. The next morning, a new notice arrived. Joint exercise, multiple bases, including Fort Ironville. And for the first time, Bate realized her doctrine wouldn't just be tested here. It would be tested everywhere. And if she failed, it wouldn't just be her silence that shattered. It would be the line she had built for every soldier who had finally, begun to believe. What happens when the whole world watches, waiting for you to fail? The convoy arrived before dawn. Trucks lined the parade ground, soldiers spilling out in crisp formations, insignia from 3 different bases stitched into their sleeves. Their boots struck in unison, their eyes sharp. Visitors but not allies, competitors. At the front stood Colonel Barrack, the man who had sneered at Bates' program weeks earlier. His jaw was square, his chest puffed with rank. He shook hands with Colonel Steele, his smirk hidden behind polite words. "Fort Ironville," Barrack said, his gaze sliding toward Bate. "This should be enlightening." The joint exercise wasn't just a drill. It was theater, a chance for brass to measure one unit against another. Rumors had spread, Carver's adaptive readiness training. Some whispered it was revolutionary. Others muttered it was weakness disguised as innovation. Bate stood steady as the briefing unfolded. Her shoulder ached, the brace hidden beneath her uniform. She could feel eyes on her, skeptics, doubters, curious observers. She didn't flinch. The scenario was brutal. A simulated urban assault. Smoke bombs, sirens, blanks echoing like live fire. Weighted dummies scattered through a mock village. Soldiers had to breach, secure, and extract, all under time pressure. Bates' unit was paired against Barrack. Side by side, same ground, same rules. When the whistle blew, Barrack's soldiers surged forward like a hammer strike. Boots pounded, voices shouted, bodies scattered fast and hard. Ironville moved differently. Bates' voice was calm, measured. "Pairs, hold the line. Read before you rate, move." Her soldiers slipped into rhythm, partners steadying each other, breaths counted, movements controlled. The contrast was immediate. Barrack's men tore through alleys, fast but chaotic, some sprinting ahead, others falling behind. Ironville's line advanced slower, but intact. The first obstacle was a collapsed barricade. Barrack's unit climbed fast, hauling themselves over in a rush. One recruit misstepped, twisting his ankle. He fell hard, crying out. His team pressed on, leaving him behind. Bates' unit reached the same obstacle minutes later. A private faltered, his pack catching on rubble. His partner braced, slowed, steadied him over. Together they cleared it. Bates' eyes swept the field. She didn't need to shout. Her voice carried calm. "Hold the line, then lift the fallen." Halfway through, chaos struck. A smoke grenade detonated near Ironville's flank. Vision cut to nothing. Barrack's soldiers used the moment to surge ahead, dragging dummies with reckless speed. Bate dropped low, hand on the paracord line stretched through the alley. "Breathe, 4 in, 7 out, stay together." Her unit moved blind but steady, each soldier clipped to the cord, guiding one another through the haze. When they emerged, coughing but intact, the sight waiting ahead caught every eye. One of Barrick's men lay on the ground, unconscious, heat exhaustion evident. His unit had left him in the rush for time. Bate didn't hesitate. "Morale's pike on me." They knelt, checking vitals, hauling the soldier between them. From the observation deck, officers murmured, pens scratching. Barrick's jaw tightened. Bate didn't look up. She focused only on the soldier in her care. The final stretch was extraction. Weighted dummies strapped on sleds to be dragged across asphalt to the finish. Barrick's men hurled themselves forward, muscles straining, faces twisted with effort. Their sleds screeched, sparks flying. But soldiers faltered, backs giving, shoulders buckling. The line broke. Bate stepped to the straps. The memory of her fall months earlier flashed, the sting of gravel, Steele's voice cutting like a knife. "Coward!" Her fingers brushed the paracord bracelet. "Not this time." She pulled, the sled shifted. Soldiers beside her matched her rhythm. Morales called cadence. 1, 2, 3, 4. The recruits echoed it, voices rising above the screech. Together, Ironville's line dragged every sled across the finish. Slow, deliberate, unbroken. When the final whistle blew, both units collapsed in exhaustion. Barracks had crossed first, but scattered, broken, leaving one of their own behind. Bates had crossed slower, but together, intact, carrying even a rival across the line. The observation deck was silent for a long moment. Then applause broke, not loud, not wild, but steady. Officers nodded, murmured, exchanged glances. Bates stood, chest heaving, sweat streaking soot down her neck. Her scars burned beneath her shirt. She didn't raise her arms in triumph. She simply stood, her presence steady, her soldiers around her still upright. Colonel Barrick descended, his jaw tight. He stopped in front of her. For a moment, silence stretched. Then he spoke, voice low. "Your unit didn't win on time, but they didn't break, and in war broken lines don't survive." Bate met his gaze. "Discipline isn't numbers, it's endurance. Endurance saves lives." Barrick said nothing more. He stepped back. But his silence wasn't dismissal this time. It was acknowledgement. That night Fort Ironville was alive with quiet pride. Soldiers carried themselves differently, their steps steadier, their voices more certain. Bates sat alone on the bleachers, the field dim under floodlights. Morales joined her, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "You know they'll never admit it outright," Morales said, handing her a mug. "But you shifted something today." Bates sipped, the warmth easing her throat. "Shifts don't happen overnight, but maybe the line's holding." Morales smiled faintly. "You gave them more than a drill. You gave them a way to breathe when the world closes in." Bates' gaze drifted across the field. The echoes of cadence still hung in the air. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her scars ached, but for once they didn't feel like chains. They felt like proof. Proof that silence could endure. Proof that endurance could spread. And proof that even under the heaviest weight, a soldier could stand again. But beyond the pride, Bate knew something else lingered. The test was not over. Because whispers don't die after one victory. And scars, hers, Steele's, every soldier, always find ways to resurface. The final trial hadn't come yet. And when it did, it wouldn't be on a field marked by whistles and finish lines. It would be in life, unannounced. And the line would need holding once more. What happens when the final test doesn't come with whistles, cameras, or judges? Just silence and the choice to act. It was 3 weeks after the joint exercise when the call came. A transport convoy had overturned on a mountain pass, its vehicles mangled by loose rockfall. Soldiers were trapped inside. Fuel leaked across the dirt road, threatening to ignite with a single spark. The radio crackled through Fort Ironville's command center. Voices cut in and out, panic sharp in their tone. Casualties pinned. Request immediate medevac, fire risk high. Colonel Steele stood frozen for a fraction of a second. Then his eyes locked on Beth. "Captain Carver, take a response team now." Beth didn't hesitate. She grabbed her gear, morales already at her side, pike trailing, a small unit forming without being asked. This wasn't a drill, this wasn't theater. This was life. The mountain road was chaos when they arrived. Smoke curled from a crumpled transport truck, its side crushed by fallen stone. Soldiers scrambled, voices breaking, some clawing at twisted metal with bare hands. Beth stepped into the scene, her voice steady. "Stop, breathe." The soldiers froze, shocked by her calm. 4 in, 7 out, do it. Their chests rose and fell unevenly. Slowly, the panic ebbed. Beth scanned the wreck. Flames licked near the fuel line. One spark would consume them all. "Morales, secure perimeter. Pike fire suppression, the rest on me." They moved. Beth crouched beside the wreck, peering into the cab. A sergeant was pinned, legs crushed under the dashboard. His breaths came shallow, his eyes wild with terror. "Ma'am, can't move, just leave me." Beth pressed a hand to his shoulder, firm but gentle. "Not leaving anyone, hold the line." She braced, pulling at the metal. Pain shot through her shoulder, the old scar flaring white-hot. For a moment, her knees buckled. The memory of the desert blast slammed back heat, fire, screaming voices. Her chest clenched. Not again. Her fingers dug into the paracord bracelet. Slow as smooth, smooth as fast. She inhaled 4 count, exhaled 7 counts. The panic dulled, the weight steadied. "On 3, she shouted. 1, 2, 3. Together they heaved. Metal screeched, shifted just enough. The trapped sergeant cried out but slid free. Hands pulled him back to safety. Beth fell to her knees, sweat dripping, her scar burning like fire under her sleeve. But she rose. There were more. Another soldier was trapped under the rear axle, his chest pinned. Flames crackled closer. Beth dropped to the dirt beside him. His lips were pale, his voice a whisper. "Ma'am, I'm not gonna make it." Beth's eyes locked on his. "You will, but you need to breathe with me. 4 in, 7 out." His chest hitched, faltered. She pressed her hand to his ribs. "Now 4 in, 7 out, don't quit on me." His breath steadied, weak but there. Beth shouted for hydraulic cutters. Together, they cut through twisted steel, hauling him out just as Pike doused a flare of fire. The unit pulled the soldier clear, his pulse thready but there, alive. Beth sagged back, chest heaving, her vision blurring with smoke. Morales's voice cut through. "That's the last of them." Beth nodded weakly, her knees trembling. The fire crews moved in, hosing down the wreck. The danger receded. The silence after chaos pressed heavy. But every soldier was accounted for. Not one left behind. Later in the triage tent, Beth sat on a crate, her arm wrapped, her uniform streaked with soot and blood. Steele entered, his eyes scanning the scene. The wounded lined on cots, the unit alive, battered but breathing. He walked toward Beth. For once his voice carried no authority, just something quieter. "You held the line." Beth met his gaze, her voice was hoarse. "We all did." Steele looked at her scars, her soot-streaked face, the paracord bracelet frayed from smoke. "You were right," he said softly. "Discipline isn't crushing weakness, it's carrying each other through it." For the first time, Steele extended his hand to her, not as commander to subordinate but soldier to soldier. Beth hesitated only a moment before clasping it. The weight between them shifted. Not gone, but different. In the days that followed, word of the rescue spread, not just through Fort Ironville, but across bases, channels, corridors of command. Reports spoke of Carver's unit holding calm under chaos, of lives saved through rhythm and restraint. But Beth didn't read the reports. She returned to the training hall. The recruits awaited her, their faces different now. No whispers, no smirks, just readiness. Bates stood before them, her scars hidden beneath her sleeve, but no longer hidden in meaning. She lifted the stethoscope, its engraving catching the light. Discipline, she said, isn't about never breaking. It's about learning how to rise when you have. It's about holding steady when fear claws at your throat, and it's about carrying the one who can't carry themselves. She paused, let the silence breathe. That's what keeps us alive. That's what makes us more than numbers. That's what it means to hold the line. The recruits listened, their eyes fixed, their posture upright. Not because she shouted, but because they believed. That night, Bates sat alone in her quarters. The box of letters rested on her desk. She opened the latest page she had written in the smoke of the convoy rescue. Her eyes traced the words. Dad, today I think I finally understood. Scars don't weaken us. They remind us to build differently, to carry differently. Maybe you were right all along. Discipline is about who we become when the weight is heaviest. Tonight, I think I finally set mine down. Bate folded the page gently, placed it in the box, and closed the lid. Her fingers lingered on the paracord bracelet. The fibers were frayed now, stained by fire and sweat, but they held. Just as she had. The base slept, floodlights dim against the horizon. Bate stepped outside, the night air cool, the stars sharp above. She stood still, breathing slow, steady, 4 in, 7 out. Her scars burned softly beneath her sleeve, not in pain. In reminder. That silence could carry weight. That dignity could endure humiliation. That strength wasn't in loud victories or empty pride. It was in the quiet moments, the held breath, the lifted fallen, the unbroken line. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And in that silence, it leaves a legacy no scar can erase.